Hello. So I can see there's not really too many people on. So we'll just give it another 2 or 3 minutes, see if anyone else comes on. If not, then we'll just go ahead and get started. But plan on 6:02 to 6:03. We should be able to get started. Hello. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. If anyone else decides to join later in the session, that's completely fine. But remember, these videos will be posted online on our YouTube channel, so don't really worry about if you kind of missed any of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the webcam so you can just see me for a bit as I do this intro. So hello everyone, welcome to the first Mission Go Inc. SAT series webinars. These will take place every Monday from 6 to 7 p.m. Central Time. And so basically every webinar will be going over a different session in the SAT. So today is reading, next Monday will be writing, the Monday after that, math, and then essay, and then finally on April 13th, we will be having kind of like a final review, which is April 13th, as you know, is the day before the school SAT here in Illinois, which is at April 14th. Obviously, currently, with the kind of current situations, we're not really sure if we'll be able to even do the SAT on April 14th, but let's just plan for that currently. So if you are not a part of the email list, which is on my website link, essentially you should join it. It's missiongoeducation.org/drop-in webinars. I will post the link in the description. I will send it in the chat right now. So essentially you have the link right there. And if you want to participate in these webinars, I highly recommend you go fill out your email to join the email list, as I'll be kind of sending out material that you might want for these kind of webinars. For example, just yesterday I sent out the practice test number 1, which we will be going over kind of after the informational session of this webinar. And if you kind of got that before, you'd be a little more prepared. You'd kind of know what's going on when I'm going over the problems. So throughout these webinars, what exactly will you be learning? Well, we're going to be mostly focusing on the big concepts of the SAT, getting a general overview of the section and knowing what to expect when you walk into that day. And obviously for these webinars, if you have like a 1580 or 1570 already, there's not really a point in listening to these unless you want some sort of quick review. So this is mainly for anyone who wants, some sort of first exposure to the test and wants to know not only what to practice, but how to practice. And lastly, before we get started, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat of the live stream. I will try to answer them as quickly as possible. Keep in mind, there is about a 5-second delay between my live stream and you guys hearing what I'm saying. So it will take me a little bit before I get to your questions, but I will get to all of them. So just so it doesn't get in the way, I'll be disabling the webcam for now. And let's get started. So firstly, here's a little about me. My name is George. I am a current junior at Neuqua Valley High School. In school, I like to participate in DECA, Math Team, Soccer, Skills USA. I'm kind of the founder and president of our little nonprofit corporation we have here, Mission Go. And probably most importantly is last August, before my junior year, I scored a 1590 on my SAT on my first sitting. So this was without any outside prep at all, and I kind of started these webinars as a way for me to share these kind of tips with other people. I have been doing kind of not online, but I have been doing one-on-one tutoring for a while. So I thought, I really am looking forward to the kind of new experience of this group learning session. And just a disclaimer before we get started, unlike other companies who kind of do this kind of prep, I really don't like to guarantee any score improvements or concrete numbers. I am mostly here for you to maximize your potential. A lot of the work for improving SAT still comes down to the student and their willingness to practice and work. So I can only lay down the path for you. The student, it's themselves, has to walk it in order to maximize their score based on the skills they already have. As I always say to my students, I can't make you from a horrible math student to a really good math student in about 1 month. Those skills have to be built up over years. However, I can try to get you the best math score possible based on what you already have. So let's move on to the actual SAT reading section. So the SAT reading section is composed of 52 questions, and you have 65 minutes to complete all of them. So there will be 5 passages with around 10 to 12 questions per passage. One of them will be science, another history, another literature, and one social sciences. As there is 5, there will be one kind of topic that is repeated. And it's important to keep in mind that one of these passages will essentially be composed of 2 smaller passages. And there will be a couple of questions that kind of ask you to place these passages in conversation. And in terms of pacing, I recommend 1 minute per question. For the reading section, I really like to have at least 10 minutes to go over your work after you're finished. 1 minute per question, in my opinion, is kind of the perfect pacing, because not only does it give you a little leeway, for example, if you complete it a little slower than maybe you kind of want to, you'll have usually at least 8 to 10 minutes to go over your work, even if you went a little slower than you wanted. And for the second reason, it's pretty simple. It's just because it's easy to keep track of. For example, you don't want to be doing math inside of your head when you're trying to keep track of time by doing 1.5 minutes per question or something. It's very simple. Glance at the clock, know if you're on track or you should hurry up a little bit. So let's go over each kind of the different sessions or different passages you might encounter and how each of them is kind of unique in their own way. So in terms of science, the most difficult thing about science is just it has a lot of technical and scientific jargon. For example, if you take a look at the passage right here, right away you can notice it says purines, monomer unit, nucleotide. These are very technical terms that students often don't really know exactly what they mean, and the SAT doesn't really expect you to know what it means. So more important for these science vocabulary words is not exactly what it means, but how it is used in the context of the passage. So very few questions will truly be asking you about exactly what these vocabulary words mean. So if you can have the skills to kind of deduce meaning out of the context of the word, then that'd be more than enough to answer these questions. And the second thing to keep in mind is just that science passages will often contain some sort of graph or table. It's really not much to worry about. You can kind of see it right here. There's a lot of data. Sometimes it can be a little annoying to go over, but in general, those kind of graph table questions aren't exactly the most difficult on the reading section, at least. So the second type I will go over is, in my opinion, by far the hardest passage, and that is history. And the main reason is just because of the language. So you can see the passage on the right. It was written in 1938, which isn't that bad. However, you may very well get passages from the 1700s or 1800s. And those type of passages, it's often really hard to understand exactly what they're talking about, because some of the different language that they use, some of the vocabulary, and some of the even the metaphors they use are extremely different from what we're kind of used to in the modern day. Additionally, these history ones can often be a little vague and a little abstract. So if you just like skim over this passage real quick, it's talking about our brothers and ascending, and it's essentially just one big metaphor for women's rights. However, it's kind of hard to deduce this meaning, and it requires some sort of inferencing and analytical thinking skills. The second thing to keep in mind when it comes to history is the historical perspective. So one of the most popular topics that the College Board has been putting on a lot of SAT and PSAT kind of passages are women's rights. So this one is actually about women's rights. And one of the things to keep in mind is the historical perspective on these women. So one example is in a passage that may say, strong, defiant woman. In our society, being a strong, defiant woman is considered a very positive thing. It has a very positive connotation. However, in the historical connotation, it may be considered very negative and very kind of out of place. So just keep that in mind in how the author may be using these. Next is the second hardest type of passage, and that is literature. So the hardest part I find about literature is just context. So literature, they often take a passage that's from usually like in the middle of a book, and then they just place it on the SAT. The issue is because it's just a random passage from the middle of the book, there's often no context for what's going on initially. So, for example, in this passage that we see right here, this first passage, it says, Akira came directly, breaking all tradition. Was that it? And you really have no idea who Akira is, what exactly is going on, until you almost get to the end of the passage and you kind of put all the pieces together and realize what it means. And secondly is they may be from a different time period. This one's from 1999. It's not that bad. However, there are literature passages that are much older and contain much harder languages. The best advice I can give for literature is always read this little blurb at the top here. Although it won't give you very complete or very comprehensive context, it will give you some basic idea of kind of what is happening in the piece, and it'll kind of help you piece the puzzle together a little better. And lastly, we have social sciences. I don't really have much to say about social sciences. I find it's a little easier than any of the other ones. And I guess the only thing to note is it may contain graphs or tables. So just keep that in mind if you really like graphs or tables or you really dislike them. So next, I usually categorize the type of approaches to this test in 3 different categories. So the first one is the one that I utilize and the one that I recommend the most. So that is skim the passage at first, read it quickly, get a basic grasp of kind of what's going on, and then answer the questions. So the reason why this is advantageous is obviously the time approach. So the questions won't be asking you on every single aspect of the passage. Really, all it's asking you to do is extract the information that the questions are asking you. So by skimming the passage, you don't waste any extra time on information in the passage that you don't need for the questions, as you merely skimmed it. And then when you answer the questions, you go back to the specific parts you need to read again, spending more time on that information that is actually asking you for. So who this is not for is if you're someone who's really bad at skimming pieces quickly. So I know a lot of people who kind of try to skim the pieces, but as a result, they just don't understand anything of what's going on. And they basically just wasted their time reading over something quickly when they really didn't get anything out of it. For those people, I recommend the second type approach, which is to read the questions first and then read the passage. If you can't really skim well, there's no point in trying to skim because you won't get anything out of it. By reading the questions, you at least know what you want to look for. You want to look for kind of these points at these parts of the passages. And that way you don't waste any time on unnecessary information when you go back and read the text. So I know this can be it seems a little unorthodox. And a lot of people who try it at first find it really weird and they do really poorly. However, what I find is that after these people have kind of gotten used to it, it almost opens up a new world for them. They can score much higher. And if you're really bad at skimming, I really recommend that you try this approach at least once or twice to see if you like it or not. And the third approach is generally what I would not recommend, and generally what I think is the worst approach, is to read the passage extremely carefully first and then go to the questions and answer them. Because of this, because you're reading the passage carefully at first, these students often waste a lot of unnecessary time on information that they don't really need. You don't need to understand every word in a passage in order to answer the questions. You just need to know the information that the questions are asking you about. So, for this type of approach, I often find that they can't finish the test on time, so I strongly recommend you go with one of the first two. Next, we'll be going over the types of questions you might expect to see, and a lot of these are according to the website Prep Scholar, which is a fantastic resource for SAT prep. However, I have changed it a little bit since I think some of their kind of categories aren't exactly super accurate or aren't exactly super helpful. So the first type of question will be the big picture questions. And these will be kind of three main categories within this bigger category, which is main point, perspective, author, attitude, which is essentially all asking you, what does the author feel? Why is the author writing this piece? We have primary purpose, which is just why this paragraph is in this passage, and rhetorical strategy, which is kind of like question number 2 over here. Which choice best describes the developmental pattern of the passage? So if all of these ask you about the passage as a whole, either asking you kind of the purpose of the entire passage or asking you a paragraph's purpose within the context of the entire passage. These questions account for about 20% of the test, and it is pretty much the largest section out of all of them on the test. So actually, so the kind of advice I give students when it comes to big picture questions, first is to check the intro and conclusion of said passage. The intro conclusion usually contain the main points and the main arguments of the author. They're either trying to establish their main purpose and attitude from the get-go, so in the intro, and they're trying to leave the reader with a lasting impression of their conclusion, hence the conclusion. These two paragraphs often contain the main point, perspective, or author attitude. So I highly recommend, if you get one of these questions, read the intro and conclusion for a second time, just to ensure that you, just because oftentimes you can find the answer in those two areas. Secondly is to, this is just a general strategy for any SAT question, is to try to answer the question in your own words. For example, if I know we don't have the passage here, but if we get question 1 here, that's which choice best describes what happens in the passage? For example, my answer might be one character asked another one, and the other one is surprised. So before I even looked at the answer key or the answer choices, I know kind of what to look for. I'm looking for one character asking another character for something, and the other character acts surprised. And so right away I can see that B seems like a very strong choice just because I answered the questions in my own words, and now I kind of have an idea of what to look for when I'm looking at the answer choices. So the second type of question on the reading section, and essentially the opposite of the first type, which is detailed questions. So the first type were big picture questions, asking you to consider the passage as a whole. Detailed questions essentially break down into two main categories. Number one, find the detail, or number two, what does this specific detail or phrase mean? So this composes of 13% of the test. And the main advice I can give students for this one is just look at the passage extremely carefully. Oftentimes they will ask you for a specific word or specific, couple words that exactly prove the answer and essentially give away what the answer is. So kind of when you determine exactly what the question is asking, go to the area or part of the passage that talked about that topic and read it extremely carefully. Sometimes it only takes a couple words for these detailed questions in order to give up kind of the answers. And you will see that in the sample questions we'll go over later. Third type is function questions, which is pretty self-explanatory. They're essentially asking you some sort of rhetorical strategy. So in this question, it is examples, and asking you, why does the author use this? What purpose does it fulfill? And the main point in this is just to look for context, know what the author's main argument or main purpose for writing the passage is, and try to figure out how the rhetorical strategy kind of fits in that larger picture of the author's main argument. So the third type is the fourth type, is the vocabulary and context. And really, the only advice I can give for vocabulary and context is, obviously, it'd be great if you already knew what the word meant, so you'd kind of be able to cross out some unrealistic or wrong answer choices right off the bat. For example, question 12, if you already knew what ambivalent meant, it'd make this question much more easy. However, if you don't, and I'm predicting a lot of people might not, the best advice I can give is to read what is surrounding the word and use each of the answer choices and try replacing that word with one of the answer choices. For example, in question 12, it'd be replacing ambivalent with unrealistic, then replacing with conflicted, apprehensive, and supportive, and then using that word in the sentence. And try to figure out whether or not just whether that word would fit in grammatically within the sentence, but also would the sentence still convey the same meaning that contributes to the author's main point. So obviously it needs to align with the author's main point in order to be most nearly mean, or is the sentence still conveying the same point overall? If it isn't, then that answer choice is most likely incorrect. So the second largest section of the test would be the evidence support. So usually these questions come in the form of, like question 44, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? These usually are not too difficult. The issue is just, for example, if you got number 43 incorrect, it would be impossible to get number 44 correct. For the evidence support, obviously one of the most important things is just to read every one. If answer choice A looks like it could work, don't just circle it down. Read every single answer choice. Make sure it is the best evidence. The key word is best. There may be multiple pieces of evidence that support the answer choice in question 43. However, only one of them will be the best evidence. Some of them may prove part of it or may kind of prove it, but they won't prove it as well as a single answer choice. So the thing with these evidence support is essentially the evidence that's provided in the lines should almost exactly state what the answer 43 of the previous answer is. For example, if the answer to 43 was it could raise the value of some precious metals on Earth, the line numbers you would pick would almost exactly state it would raise the value of some precious metals on Earth. When you see the line number and then you see your answer in number in the previous question, it should be almost a little obvious that that line numbers are supporting the answer choice in the previous question. So the next type of question type is data analysis. So these deal with tables and graphs, and they kind of fall in two large areas, which is either comprehension and interpretation. So both of them are essentially the same, asking you to read a graph or table and interpret what that information might mean. And these I find are not really too difficult. It's just it requires students to be extremely careful. For example, just look at the answer choice in question 29 over here. Notice how each answer choice is pretty much exactly the same, just a couple of words are swapped. So oftentimes that can confuse students, and even if they have the right answer, they can kind of circle the wrong answer choice because they read each of the answer choices incorrectly. So my advice on these is first narrow down whether it's yes or no, then cross out two of them. For example, if it was no, cross out the two yeses, and then read the rest of the answer choice and determine which one is correct. So kind of the last big subset of questions I'd like to discuss is the inference questions. Now, the inference questions are by far the most difficult questions on the test, just because it requires you to take information and use your own analytical thinking to reach a conclusion that is not directly stated throughout the text. So this kind of requires you to deduce things, and there are three main categories: deduction, speculation, examination. All three are essentially pretty similar. When you see an inference question, it will be pretty obvious it's an inference question. So oftentimes these inference questions can be small detail questions in disguise, as usually there is specific and almost obvious textual evidence that supports one of these answer choices. So during our sample, when we go over our practice test number 1 and we go over those 10 practice questions, you will see how even in inference questions, there is very obvious and very clear textual evidence that will support the correct answer choice. So the next type is, it only composes of 2% of the test, but is author technique. It's a subset of inference questions, and these usually deal with the tone or the past mood of the passage. And usually these are not exactly too bad. If the passage is extremely sad, it'll obviously be more of a moody, dark tone. However, if it's extremely happy or cheerful, it'll be more like, a joyful tone. The tone and passage mood is something that should be quite obvious when you read it. And if you're just really bad at determining them, don't worry about it too much. As I said, it's usually only one question. Analogy questions are also a subset of inference questions, and I would say these are the trickiest type of problems, even more trickier than the normal inference questions. As I said, inference questions can often be small detail questions in disguise. However, analogy questions often do require true inferencing, so it does require you to use almost unrelated information throughout the text in order to reach a conclusion that's not directly stated. So if you are really bad at these, obviously practice, but if you're just not exactly great at inference questions as a whole, you should stick to practicing inference questions just because they deal with a much larger number of questions compared to analogy, which averages around one question per 50 question test. So in terms of overall strategies, by far the most effective strategy I know is eliminate 3 wrong answers. Excuse my very terrible star. However, I know it might seem kind of obvious to people at first, like, oh yeah, you just eliminate 3 wrong answers. But eliminating 3 wrong answers is less of a strategy and more of just like a real mindset that you have to be in for SAT reading. The common situation I see with students who get problems wrong is oftentimes there are two answer choices then they end up getting it wrong. So the mindset that I want my students to be in is to try not the SAT. It's important to keep in mind that there is always one correct, absolutely correct answer. That answer will be correct no matter what, and it will be the only absolutely correct answer. All three answer choices will have at least one thing wrong with them. And the mindset you have to be in is not trying to find what is right, but try to find what is wrong about these answer choices. So next time you're stuck between two answer choices that seem kind of right, remember that one of them has to have something wrong with it. Even if it's just a single word, even if it's just a very small thing, but try to find what that small thing is, because once you eliminate that and know that it's wrong, you can be sure that the other one is correct. So practice this yourself. Try to find what's wrong about the answer choices. It may take some practice, but I will guarantee you this is the most effective strategy if you want to answer those toughish questions on the SAT reading section. The second point is don't waste your time on vocabulary. This is not the old SAT. It doesn't test you on vocabulary. There is a words in context, but as I said, even if you don't know what the word means itself, try to practice more on trying to deduce what that word might mean based on the textual evidence surrounding it. Third piece of advice I would give students is to answer every question, but get the ones you can first. There is no penalty for guessing, so absolutely put at least a guess down for every single answer choice. But if you find a really difficult inference question, don't waste 5 minutes on it. Set a cap for yourself. Say 2 minutes on this question. If I don't get it, I am moving on. Oftentimes, for every one hard question, there might be 5 easy questions. It is much more preferable that you skip that hard question, perhaps get it wrong, but get those 5 easy ones correct. Then, if you spend all your time on a single hard question, get it correct, but not have enough time to finish the 5 easy questions. Get all the problems you can first. If you have gone through all your high school classes in junior year and you are doing moderately well in them, I guarantee you you have the ability to answer the majority of questions. Thus, make sure you secure the easy problems first before you try to answer the few hard ones. And then the fourth and fifth are just to practice. Practice comprehension. Comprehension is not something that you can teach easily. It's a skill that's built over a long period of time. So practice reading a lot, so that way you can better understand when you do get a kind of hard or vague abstract article. And practice answer questions. So practice as many questions as you can. The more familiar you are with how the test is, the better you will be at it. So in terms of how to practice, the number one thing is just to complete more problems. So Khan Academy is a fantastic resource when it comes to this. They have so many problems on there, so many extra problems, and they also have the 10 official College Board SAT kind of practice tests that they post on there. If you want more practice, Princeton Review has some sort of practice course. Barron's always has a lot of books. And even Prep Scholar has, their kind of own online training course. However, keep in mind, these are not created by College Board, so those practice problems will all be a little different from the official SAT ones. The 10 practice tests on that College Board posted themselves are by far the best way for you to prepare and are the most quality practice problems. However, if you do run out of those 10 tests, then those books aren't a bad alternative. They'll just be a little different, so just keep that in mind. And secondly, if you want to use that skimming method first, practice skimming. Next time you have an article or you have a book, try reading it quickly and see if you can extract the main ideas and the main points from the articles, even if you just skim through it extremely quickly. In terms of the best books for SAT, I mentioned Princeton Review and Barron's. However, I find that oftentimes those books are more helpful for practice than they really are for instruction. One of the only practice books I would recommend is the SAT Black Book. It has a lot of problems, but it breaks down and walks you through exactly what the rationale for answering each of the questions are. It does contain a lot of unnecessary information or, logic that should be pretty obvious. So it is quite big. However, if you do want a very quality book for preparing, I would recommend that one. And in terms of online resources, prepscholar.com is a fantastic resource, not just in terms of practice, but in terms of just getting information, breakdowns on each of the problems. Their grammar and writing review articles are excellent. Oftentimes they will kind of overcomplicate problems, I find, but in general they have very quality preparation materials, and almost all of them are free. And lastly is just to read more. The more you read, the better you get at it. It's just that simple, and that is probably the most important thing I can recommend to kids. However, if you're preparing for something that's, say, 4 weeks away, perhaps you don't have the time to read 15 books, and I get that as a high schooler. So in terms of questions, I will leave that to the end. Right now, I will just go over to the practice SAT I have set up right now, right here. So if you're part of the email list, you would have known that I am going over the first 10 problems right now, and you probably would have read the passage by now. However, since you guys probably haven't, I will still go over the problems, and you can go and read the passage in your own time. So firstly, this very obviously is a literature passage. So this is the passage, in fact, I used as a sample for literature. So first off, as my recommendation is to always read the blurb here. So we have the blurb right here, and as we can see, it says this passage is from Lydia Minatoya, The Strangeness of Beauty, 1999. The setting is Japan. Chie and her daughter Naomi are members of the House of Fuji, a noble family. So we can start to see a little, we can delete that. So we could read the passage at first. It's a literature one, and as I said, the hardest part is the context. So Akira came directly, breaking all tradition. Was that it? Had he followed form? Had he asked his mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between? Would she have been more receptive? So as you can tell, right now we have no idea what's going on in this passage. We don't know who Akira is. What kind of tradition is he talking about? We know it's in Japan, so perhaps he's talking about some sort of Japanese tradition. However, what did he ask? What is she more receptive about? So we continue reading. He came on a winter's eve. He pounded on the door while a cold rain beat on the shuttered veranda. So at first Chia thought him only the wind. The maid knew better. Chia heard her soft scuttling footsteps, the creak of the door. The maid brought a calling card to the drawing room for Chia. So even now, we still have no idea what's going on. Why is Akira here? Why is he here on Winter's Eve? And it's really not until kind of this latter portion of the passage that we even know what's going on in the passage. What's going on in the passage is Akira is asking Chie for her daughter Naomi's hand in marriage. And Akira is not a noble family like Chie and Naomi are. So essentially Chie dismisses him. And so I don't exactly have time to read every single to read the entire passage out loud. So I hope that you will in your own time read the passage. But in the meantime, I will go over every single problem and kind of walk through why each of the answer choices are wrong and why the correct answer choice is correct. So for number one, which choice best describes what happens in the passage? So this is very clearly a main idea passage. It's asking you about the passage, main idea question. It's kind of asking you about the passage as a whole. So the first is, one character argues with another character who intrudes on her home. So if you did read the passage, you would know that is incorrect. So as we can see here, right here, Akira actually leaves Chia's home without kind of even going in at all. So again, right here, Akira actually refuses to enter Chia's home. So clearly, answer choice A is incorrect. B, one character receives a surprising request from another character. Now that sounds pretty good. Akira asks Chia for Naomi's hand in marriage, which obviously surprised Chia because of Akira's rank and how improperly he did it. So we're going to leave that for now. However, we will go to the other answer choices to see if there might be some answer choice that is better. C, one character reminisces about the choices she has made over the years. We can definitively say that one is incorrect. There are multiple characters here, and not any of the characters are kind of reminiscing at all. So C is pretty clearly incorrect. And D, one character criticizes another character for pursuing an unexpected course of action. So this one actually sounds pretty good as well. So right here, line 85, you can see that Chia criticizes Akira, saying, "Where did you meet such a fellow? Imagine he thinks he can marry Fuji here and take her to America all in the snap of his fingers." So she is essentially criticizing Akira's actions Akira for pursuing this unexpected course of action, which is asking for Naomi's hand in marriage. So both B and D sound pretty good. They are both correct in a way. However, notice the question says what choice best describes what happens in the passage. For answer choice D, really the only time that she is criticizing him is over at the end right here, and that's just a little paragraph right there. As a whole, the passage as a whole, the main idea is talking about Akira interacting with Chia, which means answer choice B is the best answer because it best describes what is going on in the passage as a whole, not just one tiny kind of little part. So question number 2, which choice best describes the developmental pattern of the piece? A careful analysis of a traditional practice. Although they do kind of describe the traditional practice over here in the first paragraph, it was important to note that it essentially says directly that Akira broke all tradition in his methods of asking for Naomi's hand in marriage. So we can pretty definitively say A is not a correct answer because in fact it is depicting an encounter that is not a traditional practice. So for B, a detailed depiction of a meaningful encounter. Now to us this sounds like it could be the correct answer. It is extremely detailed, so you see a lot of imagery being used here. His face was soft defined, he straightened stole a deferential peek at her face. In his dim light, his eyes shone with sincerity. So these are all very descriptive words, so very clearly is a detailed depiction, and it is a meaningful encounter, as Akira is asking something very significant from Chia. So answer choice C, a definitive response to a series of questions. This one is pretty obviously incorrect. Include that because perhaps there is one question in the beginning right here, but other than that, there really is not really any definitive response, and quite obviously there is no series of questions. And D, a cheerful recounting of an amusing anecdote. So this anecdote has a very serious, kind of tense undertone, and there is really nothing cheerful and amusing about it. So this one is pretty obviously incorrect, meaning a correct answer is B. So for number 3, as it used in lines 1 and line 65, directly most nearly means A, frankly, B, confidently, C, without mediation, D, with precision. So let's go ahead and So, does it mean frankly? Akira came frankly, breaking all tradition. That really makes no sense. If we read the passage, we would know that what he means by coming directly is instead of using this tradition, which is had he followed form, had he asked his mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between, essentially instead of doing that, he directly approached Chia. And that is the use of directly in this context. So no, it does not mean frankly. And Akira came confidently, breaking all tradition. Clearly, the tradition does not say that he cannot approach Chia confidently, so we can cross that out as well. C. Akira came without mediation, breaking all tradition. Now, like before, this one sounds pretty good. Breaking all coming directly, it's implied, is the complete opposite of the tradition, and it describes the tradition right here, which is asking his mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between. So a mediation is kind of just an intervention in when it comes to some sort of relationship. So very clearly, the mediation it in this context might be referring to is his mother speak to his father to approach a go-between. So this sounds pretty good. We won't cross it off for now. However, let's go on to D just to make sure it is correct. And Akira came with precision, breaking all tradition. The tradition does not state that he cannot approach with precision, so we can cross that off there and confidently say our answer choice is C. So question number 4. Which reaction does Akira most fear from Chia? A. She will consider his proposal inappropriate. B. She will mistake his earnestness for immaturity. C. She will consider his unscheduled visit an imposition. And D. She will underestimate the sincerity of his emotions. So, first off the bat, all of these almost seem kind of realistic. They all kind of seem like, they could be the correct answer choice. However, we know from SAT that only one of them is correct. The most important part of this question is knowing that this is the reaction that Akira fears from Chia, not the reaction that Chia actually has. So for example, answer choice number B, she will mistake his earnestness for immaturity. Now let's go straight to the paragraph that discusses how Chia thinks Akira is immature in a way. So right over here. So you know how children speak so earnestly, so hurriedly, so endearingly about things that have no importance in adults' mind? That's how she viewed him being Akira, as a child. So although this does say that Chia treats Akira or sees Akira as a child, it doesn't say anything about how Akira fears that Chia will see him as a child. And that is extremely important, since that means he would not be answering the question. And if we go through the rest of the passage, that is really the only section that talks about Chia seeing Akira as immature. So we can confidently cross that off, as we know that it doesn't really directly prove anything about Akira fearing something from Chia. C. She will consider his unscheduled visit an imposition. So essentially, imposition just means something that is kind of imposed, which is pretty obvious. But it's essentially saying Akira fears that Chia will feel like he is kind of imposing this request onto her, and she will kind of see it as disrespectful in a way. And although this does sound pretty good at first, we can see right here, for Madame, forgive my disruption, but I have come with a matter of urgency. That's essentially him saying that he doesn't want her to think it's kind of improper. He doesn't want to see it as imposing. So this one also sounds pretty good, kind of like A. So we will leave that and we won't cross it off for now. And for D, she will underestimate the sincerity of his emotions. So although this one does seem like it could be true, Like before, there is no part in the passage that says anything about Akira fearing this from Chie. So we can cross that one out as well. So we're left with A and C. Both of them almost seem like pretty realistic, plausible answers. So how do we answer this? This is a pretty tough question. Now, what if we moved on, took a look at question number 5, which is which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous questions? So we know with these evidence questions that the evidence has to almost directly and very clearly prove the almost exact point that is stated in the previous question. So if we actually go through each piece of evidence first, then we can kind of determine which evidence might actually match up with the answer choices in 4. And if there's one piece of evidence that matches up much better with number 4, then it is quite obvious that that answer choice will be correct. So that didn't make any sense. Let me kind of show you how it works. So line 33, his voice too refined. So keep in mind that we are looking for a piece of evidence that shows that Akira fears something from Chie. So line 33, his voice was soft, refined. So basically, no? Okay then. Basically, just right here to here. And very obviously, this says nothing about what Akira fears from Chie. It is merely just describing what Akira looks like. So we can cross that out. 49 to 50. You to mind. So you to mind. You know how children speak so earnestly, so hurriedly, so endearing about things that have no importance in an adult's mind. So yes, it does say that Chie treats Akira like a child, but then again, it says nothing about what Akira fears from Chie. And once again, that's the question we're trying to answer. What does Akira fear from Chie? So we can cross that out because it does not answer the question at all. 63-64, please to proposal. 63, please to proposal. Please don't judge my candidacy by the unseemliness of this proposal. So this answer choice seems pretty good. It's essentially him saying that he doesn't want Chie to judge kind of his candidacy for marriage based on how improper his proposal is. So from that, we can deduce that he fears that, she will do the opposite. She will judge his candidacy based on the proposal. So we can leave C because we know that this basically directly answers this question. What does Akira fear from Chie? And we'll move on to 71 to answer choice D just to make sure that answer choice C is correct. So answer choice D, eager to face, line 71 to 72. Been looking her gently in the face. Eager to make his point, he'd been looking her full in the face. Once again, there's really nothing we can deduce about what Akira fears from Chie. This is merely describing what his appearance is and what actions he is taking. So we can conclude this one is incorrect as well. And we know C is our correct answer. So how does this help us with number 4? Now that we know that the answer choice to number 5 is C, we can match that up to what is the best answer choice for number 4. So C, as we said, what he is scared about is he is scared that Chie will consider his candidacy for marriage, and she will judge it based on how improper it is. So this essentially is exactly stating that Akira fears that his proposal would be considered inappropriate by Chie. And because he fears it so much, he directly tells Chie not to judge it based on how improper it is. So we can cross out C. We know A is the correct answer. So number 4s and 5 are actually some of the most difficult problems out of the first 10 here. And obviously, if you get number 4 incorrect, then getting number 5 correct is pretty much impossible. However, once you get number 4 correct, number 5 will be quite obvious. So in terms of kind of these type of questions, if this question takes you a lot of time, I fully understand if number 4 takes you a lot of time. And if you subsequently can't get number 5, please skip these 2 problems, come back to them later. There are some much easier problems later on. In the passage, so number 6, in the passage, Akira addresses Chie with A, affection but not genuine love. That we can pretty much conclude is incorrect. He obviously treats her with a great amount of respect, but not affection at all. B, objectivity, but not complete impartiality. That really doesn't make much sense in terms of the context of this passage, so we will cross that off as well. Amusement, but not mocking disparagement. He does not treat Chie at all with amusement. He is very respectful and almost like kind of sees her as this big figure and kind of sees himself almost as inferior to her. So there's really nothing amusing about it, and this passage as a whole is very serious and quite, quite somber in a way. So we can cross C out. And respect but not utter deference. As stated earlier, the best way we can describe how Akira addresses Chie is with a huge amount of respect. So there's a lot of examples of these. For example, he bows to her. He decides to leave when he thinks that he is being opposing on him. He addresses her with very proper words and refuses to go inside even when offered to. So we can conclude from there that Akira addresses Chie with a very large amount of respect. So 7. The main purpose of the first paragraph is to blank. Is to A, describe a culture, B, criticize a tradition, C, question a suggestion, D, analyze a reaction. So let's first read the first paragraph again. Akira came directly, breaking all tradition. Was that it? Had he followed form? Had he asked his mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between? Would Chie have been more receptive? So essentially, so let's try to answer this question in our own words at first. So what exactly is Akira saying in this first paragraph? He's saying, would Chie have reacted differently if he had followed tradition? If he had acted differently, if Chie would have reacted differently? Essentially what he's doing is he's kind of questioning his own actions in relation to Chie's reactions. So with that in mind, right away D looks extremely good to us, just because it at least deals with analyzing a reaction, which is, as we established, kind of what he's doing in here. However, let's just go through the rest of the answer choices to make sure they're incorrect. Describe a culture. Very clearly that they do kind of describe the traditional Japanese culture for asking for Naomi's hand of marriage in this first paragraph. But this is not the main purpose of the first paragraph. It is simply a part of it, but the main purpose as a whole is trying to analyze whether Chie's reaction could have been different based on his actions. So we can cross that out. B, criticize a tradition. He describes a tradition, but he's not criticizing it anyway, so this one is pretty clearly incorrect. Question a suggestion. There really is no suggestion, and he isn't really quite questioning anything, so we can cross that out. And D, pretty clearly correct. Question number 8. As used in line 2, form most nearly means Akira came directly, breaking all tradition. Was that it? Had he followed form? So this word right here. Had he asked his mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between, would she have been more receptive? So let's use our strategy of replacing words here. Had he followed appearance? Had he asked his mother to speak to his father? No, that we can conclude that is incorrect. This form word is actually referring back to tradition here. So we're really trying to find a synonym for tradition. Had he followed custom? Had he asked his mother to speak? That sounds pretty good. Custom, as you know, can be used as a synonym for tradition. So this very well might be the answer, so let's not cross it off. But like usual, let's go through the rest of the answer choices to make sure it is correct. Part C, structure. Had he followed structure? Had he asked his mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between? That makes no sense. Had he followed nature? That very obviously makes no sense. So B is our correct answer. Question number 9. Why does Akira say his meeting with Chie is a matter of urgency? So before we look at the answer choices, this is one that I would recommend students to kind of answer themselves or create an answer choice themselves. So why does he say it's a matter of urgency? Well, we can see right here, because he received the opportunity to go to America as a dentist for Seattle's Japanese community. So the reason why he is in a matter of urgency is because he got a job in Seattle's Japanese community, and he wants to ask for Chie's hand in marriage to either become his Yoshi or to take her to America. So knowing that right away, C seems like the correct answer. But like always, let's go through all the answer choices to make sure that that is indeed the best answer. So A, he fears his own parents will disapprove of Naomi. They really never discuss Akira's own parents at all, so we can cross that off. He worries that Naomi will reject him and marry someone else. Well, at the end right here, it says Naomi says, I mean to have him. So we can probably conclude that Naomi does not really want to reject him. So we cross that off. He has been offered an attractive job. As we said, that one sounds pretty good. And D, he knows that she is unaware of his feelings for Naomi. So this one is actually correct. He does know that she is unaware of his feelings for Naomi. However, it is asking us, why does Akira say his meeting with Chie is a matter of urgency? He does not think it's a matter of urgency because Chie is unaware. Akira says his meeting is a matter of urgency because he has to leave for a different country. So we can cross off D, because although it is correct as a statement, it is not a correct response to the question itself. So C is our correct answer. And which choice provides the best evidence to your previous question? So already we kind of highlighted this paragraph right here, line number 40. And so right away we kind of think that that's the correct answer. So this 39 to 42 one is looking pretty good. However, let's go through the rest of the answer choices just to make sure it is indeed the best evidence. So 39, I don't want to trouble you. That really says nothing about how he's offered an attractive job in another country, so we can cross that off. 39 to 40, normally I would approach you more properly, but I've received word of a position. I've had an opportunity to go to America as dentist for Seattle's Japanese community. You said this one sounds very good. He's basically exactly states that he would approach her more properly if he didn't receive this opportunity. So let's not cross that one off for now. 58 to 59, depending to Japan. Depending on your response, I may stay in Japan. I have come to ask for Naomi's hand. So this one we can say is incorrect because it doesn't say anything about what we said in number 9, which is he'd been offered an attractive job. So we're finding something that states that he did find an attractive job in another country. And answer choice number D, I see to you. 172, so I see, I have startled you. That, once again, is very obviously incorrect. That says nothing about how he's been offered an attractive job. So we can say B is our correct answer. So that's basically it when it comes to these first 10 questions. I hope that me kind of walking it through has been helpful to all of you. So kind of lastly, I want to touch on, one-on-one tutoring at all. So if you're anything like me, the kind of recent COVID-19 outbreak has thrown a, let's just say, a pretty big wrench into your kind of daily life and such. And with school, and not only that, which is with tutoring. As of right now, our school, if you kind of live in the Chicagoland area or Illinois, you have to take the SAT, the school SAT, on March 14th. It is state mandated. So therefore, right currently, since a lot of our schools are only suspended until April 6th, that April school SAT is still scheduled to run on time. However, if it does get delayed, I guess we'll deal with it. And I know that a lot of kind of test prep tutoring is kind of decreasing based on, a lot of these in-person businesses are kind of being forced to close by this virus. So as a result, I have also moved all of my one-on-one tutoring online as well. So I can do private test tutoring through SAT or ACT. Any school subjects you might need, for example, writing, math, or physics, I can also cover. Additionally, there's someone else in our organization. She is an Ivy League student, goes to the Wharton School of Business at University of Pennsylvania. Since her school has been suspended for the semester, if you are a junior or senior, she will be more than happy to help you kind of with the college process and get you a head start on applying to college. And not just that, but kind of formulating a college plan, writing your essays, and any other questions you might have about the process as a whole. If you're interested at all, feel free to email any of us, missiongoeducation@gmail.com, and hopefully I will sort out something for all of you who are interested. So if that is it and there are no other questions, then I will end this stream now. If there's any questions, please state them right now. But I will be ending the stream in 1 or 2 minutes, and I hope you guys will all stay safe, and I hope to see you all next week.